Hello, my name's Evelyn, and today we will talking about the features of sinusoidal function. I will be introducing you to some basic features of a sine graph, and then I'll introduce you to some basic graphing of a sine graph. So let's get going. So the first step we have is their definition. What are exactly midline, amplitude, and period? So midline is very straightforward. It's a horizontal line that runs in between the graph, right in the middle half of the distance between the maximum and minimum values. The amplitude is half the distance between the maximum and minimum values. So you can also say is the distance between the maximum value to the midline or the minimum value to the midline. So next we have the period. A period is a full cycle in which the pattern of the graph restarts. Each period has a minimum and maximum point. Here we have a sine graph equation. A sine b x minus h plus k. So A is the amplitude. To find the period, you need the equation 2 pi over b. H is the phase or horizontal shift, and k is the vertical shift. But we only focusing on A and B today. I will be showing you two ways you can find the midline, amplitude, and period. The first one is graphing. So this is a sinusoidal graph or sine graph. So to find the midline, you take the average of the maximum and minimum values. So the maximum is 1 and the minimum values is -1. We add them together, divide by 2, and we get y equals 0 for midline. So the amplitude is half the distance between the maximum and minimum point. But I can also do the distance between the maximum to the midline. So I take maximum minus 0, which is the midline, and I get 1. So here we can't use the equation 2 pi over b because we have no equation, but to find the period of the graph, you have to look the distance between one maximum to another maximum or one period to another period. I mean one minimum to another minimum. So the first minimum I see here is negative pi over 2, and the second one is 3 pi over 2. So in order to find a period in this graph, you have to find the differences between them. So 3 pi over 2 subtract negative pi over 2 is equal to 2 pi. So the second way you can find midline, amplitude, and period is in a given equation. Here is the equation y equal to sine over sine 1/2 x. So how do you find the midline, amplitude, and period? So since there's no horizontal or vertical shift in this equation, we assume that the midline is equal to 0. So the amplitude is A, if you remember from the other side. So you can see here there's a number in front of sine, which is 2, and that's A, so amplitude is equal to 2. So you graph the maximum right at 2 and the minimum right at -2. Lastly, how do you find the period? So the period is 2 pi over b is the equation. So what exactly is b? So b is the letter in front of x, or it goes with x. So right here, b is 1/2. So you plug it in, 2 pi divided by 1/2, and you get 4 pi. So you can graph a point right at 4 pi, which implicates a full circle or a period. And then you can graph one at 2 pi to indicate the to graph a maximum and then a minimum. So let's put them all together. So first you put a point at origin 0, 0, since we have no horizontal or vertical shift, and since this is where sine graphs start. And so we take a quarter of the period, which is a period of our period, which is right at the period, and then we plot it right at the maximum. So we get pi, 2 for the next point. And then what you want to do is then you intersect the x-axis, so you have another point at the mid period at 0, 2 pi, 0. So you want to find a minimum. So what you do is you get the third quarter of our period, which is at the third period, and the minimum value of the graph is -2. So you graph a point at 3 pi, -2. And then you connect them, and we have this graph right here. So congratulations for learning this, and hope to see you next time.